Hi, I'm Tommy Gibbs. Thanks for taking time to watch this podcast. This podcast series is titled What's Your Story? And that's exactly what it is. I'm going to be interviewing people and let them tell us their story. I've always been intrigued, amused, found it fascinating people's stories from the time they started out as a young person to where they've gotten to today. So the focus is going to be getting people to tell us their story. I mean, when I meet people, the first thing that pops in my head is I want to say to them, "Hey, tell me what's your story." So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be learning some great stories. So stay tuned and thanks for watching the podcast. Hey, I'm Tommy Gibbs and welcome to What's Your Story? And today I'm going to be talking to Brian Kramer. Many of you know Brian. Brian's been around a while. He's probably one of the smartest car people I've ever met, a great leader. He's not only is he a grassroots guy, and I'm bragging about him, but not only is he a grassroots guy and knows the car business, he's like a technology wizard. So with that said, everybody welcome. Hi, Brian Kramer. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Right. So, Brian, the whole idea with this is to let people kind of understand your journey. So, first, tell me, where did you grow up as a young kid? Where did your family start out at?
I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and oddly enough, Joe Chura, he founded Dealer Inspire. He's a little bit younger than me, but we were literally living in the same neighborhood, went to the same elementary school
No
on the south
kidding.
side of Chicago, which isn't the nicest area. My father is a steel man who came up in the steel mills, and
Yeah.
yeah, so then went from there to Youngstown, Ohio, another steel town, and ended up
Go to
in
high school.
Columbus, Ohio.
Did you go to high school in Ohio? Is that where you went to high school?
Yep, went to high school in Columbus, Worthington, and
Mhm.
that's where I became a lot porter. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to
Wait a
do
minute. Hold on a
when I
second. Hold on a
grew up.
second. Hold on. So, you were in high school and you became a lot porter.
Yep,
This is
at an
another, I think
Oldsmobile store.
this is going to be another one of those great stories. So, go ahead. You were a lot porter in high school.
Lot porter, and it's one of those. Um, I don't know if you've ever worked up north, but working up north as a lot porter in the wintertime,
Oh, I can only
everybody
imagine.
always says that they walk up hill both ways, but it literally, I used to have to detail so your socks are soaking wet, and
Yeah.
then they at the end of the night you got to go walk a you know 20 acres of conversion vans and
God.
Oldsmobiles and 98 Regencies and had to lock them all up
Oh my
and
goodness.
make sure that there was no keys underneath the visors or whatever. But you're walking through inches of snow after you've been detailing cars all day. So your socks freeze up and it gives you a whole appreciation of making
Yeah.
sure the inventory is tight before you leave.
So you did that doing high school. What happened right after high school?
So right after high school, well, I was going to go to Ohio State. I enrolled, went down there for orientation. And as I started thinking about it, back then, you know, college wasn't as much as it is today. But when I got out of college, and I just started dabbling in selling cars, and they gave me a shot selling cars right as I was graduating, and I realized that in the 1 month I would be making double or triple what I would have been after 4 years of college because I was going to go into nutrition science at Ohio State. So I realized, I make a lot more money selling cars. I'm going to try this for a minute and see what happens.
Who were you working for at that time in the car business? What dealer was that?
I was working for Tom Gill, which is Tom Gill
Oh, I know
Chevrolet.
Tom Gill. I've done work with Tom Gill. Great
Great
people.
dealer.
Yeah, great people. Yeah.
And
Huh.
then shortly after that, I worked for the Infinity store in town, which I was able to get a job at F&I because everybody else, well, they came in and they were doing some things they shouldn't have been doing. So they kind of fire sailed the whole management team, bounced drafts and everything. And nobody knew how to use a computer at that time. So it's like right place, right time.
So
It's not like
this was that Tom Gill
sorry, I left Tom Gill and went to work at the Infinity
of the
store in
Infinity. Okay.
Columbus.
So how old were you when you got that first F&I shot?
19,
Okay. Good gosh. Holy.
right?
Oh.
And it was because I knew how to use a computer. And back then, everybody was intimidated by it. And I'd grown up with a Commodore 64. And they said, "Hey, do you know how to use one of these things?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it can't be that hard because it wasn't that hard to me." But everybody, this was in the mid 90s. And the interesting thing is, I'm a Gen Xer, but when I was born, the, the average, I guess it's the least amount of people born in like the last 100 years.
Yeah.
So I had less competition.
Nah.
And so when I got into it, there's like, everybody I worked with and all my friends were 20, 30 years older than me for maybe 5, 10 years, until all my friends got out of college. And I didn't have as much in common with my friends. And while they were going to college, I was grinding it out. And maybe I should rewind for a second. I made a decision as I was also coming out of college or coming out of high school. A friend of mine wanted to open up a nightclub. So back then, you could just walk into a bank and say you wanted to open up a nightclub, and I got a bunch of loans and probably stretched the truth a little bit on a couple things. And next thing you know, it was the best of times, and then it was the worst of times,
Yeah.
and I had to pay those loans back, or else I was going to be in big trouble. So the only way out of that was selling cars. So I didn't talk to my friends for 3 years, and I just worked bell to bell because I knew what the alternative was.
When you went into F&I, did they actually send you away to school anywhere, or you just learned on the job? Did they send you to JM&A or Pat Ryan or something like that?
No, I wish I went years later. I was talking to Patrick Abad about this a few hours ago, actually, because we were talking about that we need the same thing for used cars, like JM&A school. But back then, I was trained by the each person that had their own products. They
Right.
would, and they had their own, intentions, and it wasn't always what was in the best interest of the store and the best interest of everybody else.
Yeah.
But it was also not the most ethical every time because it was there was I wasn't exposed early on to the formalized training like that. Later in life I did, and then and those ones are the ones that everybody should go through. And it's also like Navy SEALs or the Marines. That okay, if you went through Pat Ryan, you went through JM&A school, Aon, that that's not easy. It's not just to check the box. You're going
Right.
to get core comp at the beginning, core comp at the end, and it's serious. You get that plaque, you earned it.
What was your journey after F&I at that first at the Infinity store? What was your progression from that point? What did you do next?
I normally don't get into all of this. This is actually so I started getting lured by the money. So then now I'm an F&I manager, and I'm thinking that I'm better than I am, and I didn't really know what I was doing. It was you're desking deals, and you think you know what's going on, but you're really just learning from whoever you're working for. And I wasn't working for the most talented people, so it's like the Peter principle. I can only get so good, right? So then I left there. I got recruited because I thought I was hot stuff, and I go over to an Audi store and worked there for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then I got recruited with another sign-on bonus to go to a Ford store. So I'm getting lured by all this like sign-on bonuses or whatever, and that next thing you know, I realize that I'm not happy and I'm not fulfilled. I'm not, well, what am I doing? And I'm dating my wife, that I'm married to now, but her parents are like, wait, this guy keeps switching jobs. He's in the car business. What are you guys? What are you doing with this guy?
Yeah.
So I had been ever since I was at Infinity trying to apply at Germain Lexus of Dublin. And
Ah,
back then I was Lexus of Columbus, and it was number one in the nation in customer satisfaction. There was a waiting list that was 2 years long to be able to work at the place. They were hardcore in terms of the interviewing process. You had to have had previous management experience to sell cars there. And I was having a hard time getting in. And finally, as I'm at that Ford store, and I wasn't happy. I'm driving way further than I needed to because I was chasing the money. Um, the general manager over there, who's still there today, Roberto Vasquez,
I know
calls
the
me up and he
name.
said, "Hey, yeah, I remember, yeah, he was in the
Yeah.
meeting,
Yeah.
a few of those meetings, but you were
Yeah.
when you were coaching Jermaine."
Yeah.
And he called me up because I'm going to interview you. I went through like 4 sales interviews with all these different people, and then ultimately Rick Germain personally interviewed me and talked to me, drilled me about CSI, customer satisfaction, the importance of it. And I'm like, man, I can't. Typically, every other place I've worked, if you can breathe on a mirror, you're hired.
Yeah.
And these guys were like, really, you had to go through an escalation process, and they even had other veteran salespeople interviewing you. And it made me want to work there even more.
Yeah. Sure.
And the onboarding, so I actually took a step backwards and went back into sales. And
But
it was
this was at
that
their
was the
Lexus
best,
store in Dublin.
the Lexus store in Dublin. And that's really one of the best decisions I ever made, was going backwards, and going back into sales, and really having to hone my skills, right? Because I was just raw, and they had a process, and they had an up system, and they had controls, and in order to get a deal desk, you had to have every line filled out, and I started learning what excellence looks like,
Yeah.
and because I hadn't experienced it up until that point. And that operation was, yeah, it was special back then. And then they opened up, they were awarded a second Lexus point. This was in 2000. It opened up on September 7th of 2001, and 4 days before September 11th.
Oh yeah.
So I decided to take a risk. I was in my comfort zone there. I was selling cars. I was also backing up F&I on certain nights or whatever, and then helping out with desk and deals. And took a leap to drive to Easton,
Wow.
where we met,
Hmm.
and opened that up. It was an open point. Didn't know history. There was no units in operation. I didn't know what to expect. And I remember when I was going to go work over there, I just paid off all those loans from that nightclub and had nothing to show for it. And I
Yeah.
finally come up for air, and I didn't want to work that hard, at that
Yeah.
age. And I didn't.
How old were you about at that time?
21.
Oh gosh. Okay. Good.
So I go over there, and Rick takes me out to lunch, and he says, "Hey, we're going over there. I'm going to need a manager over there. So what I'm thinking about doing is putting you as a utility and have you do you backup used car manager, assistant new car manager, and F&I manager, because we're not going to have enough headcount." And I said, "How much am I going to make?" And it was less than what I was making. And I said, "Well, why would I do that?" I said, "I don't even know if I want to really be in the car business." And he goes, "And why is that?" And I said, "Because it doesn't have the best reputation. It's my girlfriend's family that I go to these cookouts. They're always like, 'Hey, you work all the time, and why you want to be in the car business?'" And it was very interesting what Rick Germain said to me that day. That actually changed the trajectory of my life. He said, "You know what? I don't like those things about it either. I don't like all the negative stereotypes." He goes, "And I look at it like a Neiman Marcus or a Nordstrom. And I think that it should be, I want to be, regarded as one of the finest retailers, not car dealers in the country." And I said, "Okay, that's interesting. I've never heard anybody talk about the car business like that." And he said, "But I'm going to need people to help me change that perception. So why don't you help me change it?" And
Wow.
I said, "Well, what would that look like?" And he started painting this picture and telling me about Sewell and telling me about
Yeah.
other operations. And that those thoughts had never even crossed my mind. Um, and then he mentored me there, mentored. There's another thing of timing. I think timing is a huge part of anybody's development, because I was there when Rick Germain was still working the desk, and that hands on to be able to learn directly from him, which was a small window that not everybody was able to be
Sure.
exposed to.
Yeah.
And then when I went out to Easton, they were scaling up, and at that time they only had two dealerships in Columbus before that Lexus store, and like four in Naples. But so I go over there, and they put the headquarters in that Lexus store, and I met, got to start spending time with Steve Germain, and was able to get mentored by him at the same time, and John Melashenko,
So
who and
when did John Melashenko come onto the scene? Was he already with them when you were working there when you first started with Jermaine, or did he come on later?
no, it's another great question. So they bring Melashenko in, and this is 3 months before we opened up the Easton store, and they said, "Hey, this guy's going to be the GM of the Easton store." And everybody else in the dealership was like, "This guy's never sold a car." Now, he was the national sales manager for
Right.
Toyota, and really stretched me out. But they said, who's going to go over there and work for a guy who's never sold a car?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I
it
can
was the
imagine.
craziest,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So he pulled me aside, and he said, "Hey, here's my vision, and this is what I'm thinking, and blah blah blah." And everything he said to me seemed to make a lot of sense. And he said, "But I'm going to need to lean on you and a couple other people, because you guys know things I don't know, but I'm going to teach you things that maybe you don't know," which he did. And so going over there, it was it was crazy exciting for the first 4 days, and then September 11th happened,
yeah,
and everything came to a screeching halt, and all of our inventory was worth half of what we paid for, and we bought it all at the auction just to fill up the lot before we and took age inventory from other stores, and then that happened. So we had to get. That's actually how I really learned how to get efficient with the CRM, because CRMs had just come out when I was at these other stores. I was using index cards and a
yeah,
Rolodex,
sure, yeah,
because there was no CRM.
yeah.
And so then I had to be proficient at Autobase. And I'm like, how does this thing
Oh,
work? And this is right, it just come out.
yeah,
So yeah, and Melashenko didn't know really the old way. All he knew was this. And he said, why, it was just, taskmaster. Why are these things not zeroed out? And I'd never, it was more of a guideline, but that for him, that's how he could control the business. And he ran it through the CRM, through the data, and opened my eyes up. I didn't know anything about data until I met John. And his mentorship, and I know I drove him crazy along the way, but developing me set me up for when they bought that Mercedes store. And they bought it. I think they ran through 4 GMs in a little over a year because this place was in the worst part of town on a one-way street that closed down on Sundays during the Ohio State parades, and all the reasons. They sold 12 cars a month and like 5 used, and that's all the parking spots they had, and there was prostitutes outside, and you had all this crazy stuff happening, and a bunch of reasons not to sell cars.
Yeah.
And so after these other 4 went through there were smart operators, but they went down there and it just wasn't what they were used to. So then they stick me down. Right, I was at that point, I'd been with John for I think a few years, and we had turned it around and got to the point where Easton was outselling Dublin, and we were winning a lot in the lead of Lexus. And Dave Kaler, who's now the COO of AutoNation, he was the first non-germain COO of that group before John.
Okay.
And he, was helping them scale up. They're buying all these dealerships, and I think like maybe 15 stores in 10 years or something. And as he was going through all the scaling, he goes, "Hey, I'm gonna stick you at the Mercedes store." And I said, "In what capacity?" He said, "I'm gonna put you down there as a sales manager." And I was like the new car director at the time, so, like acting as a GSM for John.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "And what's that going to pay me?" And I forget what it was about half what I was making at the Lexus store. That was a Taj Mahal, beautiful,
Yeah.
systems in
Yeah.
place. And he said, and he goes, "I'm giving you the best gift that I could ever give you. The knowledge and the experience and everything you're going to learn from that is worth more." I go, "Yeah, but I'm building a new house on the polar opposite side of town. Just got married, and now, I'm going to, build a house. I can't go backwards 50%. He goes, "Well, as long as you perform." I go, "Well, nobody else has ever performed like that at that store." He goes, "That's why I'm sending you down there, because you don't know any different." And that's kind of what we did. And that's where we started doing remote. So I went down there, and the first day there's rats, and I'm all excited like a kid in a candy store. It's my first assignment. I go
Sure.
down there at like 5 a.m, and I'm looking down at the landscaping. There's cockroaches going around because they had cut out the bug spraying. And I unlocked the door, and the lot porter that had been with that store for it was an old Studebaker store that converted, and go in there, and the lot porter was literally in the showroom in a E-Class wagon with a champagne bottle in the cup holder and a prostitute in the passenger seat. and and I walked in, and I said, "Hello," and he goes, "Oh, who is this person? Woman, you got to get out of here. I don't know this woman." And he's still like in his uniform. And I called up Dave Kaler. I go, "You're never going to believe what just happened." And he said, "Well, that's part of the contract. We got to, he's staying with us for a couple of years." And I said, "I don't even know how to even describe what I just experienced." And then that was far from the craziest thing that would happen down there. But I brought 1 or 2 other key people from the Lexus store that I knew, because I think that whenever you go into a store, you got to have somebody that's got your back. And
Absolutely.
actually, one of them is with me at AccuTrade today, and he came with me in Clearwater. And there's
Really?
somebody that will always, yeah. And first time he joined me was at that Mercedes-Benz store. His name's Kevin Crosby.
I
And
know
I
that.
brought it, and another person, Brad Swetlin, came down there with me, and he was one of the top salespeople, and that didn't go over too well. But I asked him, I said, "Why would you want to come down there?" And he said, "Because I know that it's going to be fun, and there's going to be a lot of things happening." And we started working the service drive because there's no traffic, so we had to get creative there. And then back then, you didn't have desking tools and CRMs that were web based; they were on server.
Yeah.
So you had to download everything onto a laptop or whatever. So we started, and nobody would come to that dealership after 3 or 4 o'clock because it was such a bad part of town.
Yeah.
So we started doing mobile presentations. So we take a phone up, and all they were using us is to get a better deal to shop to buy from Crown across town. So we
Right.
would hop in, we say, hey, we'll come to you. You're downtown at the Huntington building or Nationwide. And we would literally pick up our prospects outside, hop in the car. I'd be in the back seat and salesperson would be driving and I'd be desking the deal. Or
You're
a
kidding
customer
me.
would be driving on a test drive. I'd be desking the deal on Market Scan in the back seat,
Really?
doing remote presentations because we just there was no other way to do it, and there was no other way to compete. So we had to think outside the box,
That is
and I
crazy.
think Melashenko is the one who really got me thinking outside the box because he didn't have any preconceived notions about the business,
Right.
so he would question everything, and that's what. And just as soon as we finally were getting really profitable, making good money, again, we're sales efficient and then some. Then we moved to that big Mercedes store where you used to do the training.
Yeah.
Moved in on September 7th of 2010, right before the Great Recession, or right as it was about to peak, right? And
Beautiful
they gave
place.
us
It's a beautiful
all the
place.
AM, right? So I got September 11th, and then this, and go into the biggest rent factor that was 10 times what our other rent factor was, with all that first year expense of an open point, depreciation, furniture, everything. Right, have to double the size of
Sure.
the staff, and we weren't selling any used cars, as you know, or we were selling the amount of spaces that we had on the lot, and we weren't turning any. And I didn't believe I could turn more than that at the time, and it seemed like an insurmountable task. That when you've only got so many spaces, how are you going to get out of this situation?
Yeah.
And again, didn't have a choice, And I remember Steve Germain told me one time, because I started going to that excuse mode, and I said, look, I did this at this store and this store. You got to trust me that this is just not possible. And he goes, no, no, no. And there was no impossible with him, right? There's X amount of people that are going to buy a luxury vehicle in this city this month, next month, and the month after. I don't care about Lexus and BMW and all these other things. You mean to tell me that you can't sell one out of every four people in this town a luxury car? You don't you think that there's that many people that are better than you? And I go,
Wow.
well, when you put it like that, he goes, you can look at these percentages and sales efficiency, but I'm just going to keep it simple. He goes, and you've got more business leaving than buying, and you're closing. You got 3/4 of the people that aren't buying compared to a quarter you're closing. That's a lot of people. You just got to follow up more, or you need to go to them, or I don't care what it takes. So, and I said, okay, but let's just see if we can get more realistic. And he goes, we're not going to get realistic. He goes, just like you were the fifth person I found down at that Mercedes store. There's always somebody. He goes, and it might not be the person after you, and it might not be the person after that, but I'll eventually find them just like I found you. And he goes, I was going to find the you that was as hungry as you used to be before you got
Wow.
comfortable.
He knew how to push your buttons, didn't
I still remember it, like,
he? Yeah.
and I'm like, and what else I had to do is look in the mirror, and I go, he's right, because he always does find that person,
Right.
and that person's always out there, and there's always somebody that wants it more. Um, and then turn that around, and then once I got out of my own headspace, I think that's when you came in, and we reinvented the used car business, and then they gave me the Cadillac store along with it, and Smart and Sprinter and the multiple rooftops or whatever. And I had to reinvent myself again with Rich Ackman, because
Oh,
I just wanted to work my way out of it and work more hours.
yeah.
And I thought I could just work 17 hours a day. And now I'm going to work 18 hours a day. And I couldn't delegate. I didn't know how to manage my time, prioritize, hold people accountable.
I forgot all about
Um,
Rich Ackman being with you guys. God, I forgot about that. I'm sorry.
yeah, it
Go
was a
ahead.
total. No, as you're saying that, I'm sitting there thinking about all the people,
Yeah.
you and Melashenko and Ackman and Rick Germain and Steve Germain and Dave Kaler and Dave O'Brien and Mike Maroney and Jim Bender and
How
all
did
these
you end
people.
up? You ended up in Clearwater after that, right?
Yep. But these amazing mentors have changed my life. Like I think that I've been able to learn from the best of the best that ever worked in this business. That's my biggest asset, I would say. But
I
yeah,
don't want to
so
get you. I don't want to get you off track, but I have a question for you on that.
yeah,
Um, And I think people listening could benefit. I feel the same way that you do in that I've been really blessed to have some really great mentors. And I'm thinking, was that just blind luck, or did I do a good job of just somehow picking the right people to be around? You had some great mentors. Was it blind luck, or were you digesting it and really knew who you were selecting to be around? How did that, how do you explain that?
I think some of it's just random luck and timing, but I will say this. The one thing that I've always done, even when I was in Clearwater, right? I was looking you up and picking your brain. I've always latched on to everybody I knew that could teach me things that I didn't know, that had
Sure.
already been there and already had walked through those landmines. And sometimes I walked over them anyway, and just had to touch the electric fence. But I think a lot of it was timing, but I think a lot of it I was at least able to identify and be cognizant of the fact of this person knows a lot more than I do. They've been to this party before, and I can learn from them. And I've always just tried to suck as much information out of people
Yeah.
during
Well, then
store hours and after hours as possible.
that's all on you. How did you end up in Clearwater? Give me that piece of the story.
It's all coming out on this episode. Um, so then I'm, you know, pranking at that Mercedes store. We started out selling the other store in town that was always the bigger store, and we were, I don't know, for 2 3 years, they didn't beat us, not even close, and we were, it was domination, right? So we're getting more profitable. I'm getting cocky. Um, we're growing. There's opportunities that are happening. I'm sitting there going, man, this person's getting that job, that job. What why am I not getting that job? And it's because they, you know, thought that I was happy and that you're making good money and other people need a shot. And I wasn't also raising my hand and saying it. So how would they even know? Right. So I see this all the time as I go around the country is
Yep.
people like, why are they not offering me that job? They
Yeah.
should know. And I'm like, well, have you told them?
Yes.
Well, how could they not know?
Yeah.
And I was that guy. And you know, and yeah, I'm sitting there internalizing all this stuff. And actually it was, I ended up, Dave Kaler left and I was going to actually go work for Sonic. And then he ended up randomly in Clearwater, and they hired me for a Ford store. And, and I guess I'll tell that and I'll come back to the Melchenko when I left. But so I interviewed with a few different people at that time. And I was sitting there thinking that people didn't see the value. And I had gone up so fast, so quick. I became a GM when I was like 24, 25. And
Wow.
then I was running like multiple stores at 28. And when you have people that come up that quick, as I look back in retrospect, it was like too much too fast. And and a lot of it too was the timing. If I wasn't working for the Germains at that exact moment when they went from 2 to 20 stores and there was all these opportunities, because that was like a one-time thing. And I wasn't prepared or qualified for half of these things that they gave me the opportunity to do. But once I got a hold of any rung on that ladder, I wasn't letting go, no matter what. And because I knew if not, somebody else was going to get that opportunity. And I never wanted to give them up. But as I'm going through that, I also thought I was better than I really was, and that they weren't acknowledging it. So as I kept on making more and more money, my pay plan was set up that it was getting a little out of line. So then they cut me. And I'm like, after all this work and all these bell to bells, and this is how they repay me. And it wasn't, it was just comp modeling. And I had
Yeah.
blown the pay plan out. Right. So of course I'm taking it personal. This is the insult on my integrity and all the things that happen. Of course, as soon as that happens, there's about 25 people waiting in the pity party to join me. Oh yeah, you're so much better than that. You deserve better. You can do anything, and I'm
They feel
believing
your
it, right?
soul.
Yes. And yeah, it's just immaturity.
Yeah.
So then I started interviewing and get romanced about all these things and whatever. And I had, and just like at Germain, when I've sold cars, AutoNation, running through the ringer, all these different people, and it's an elimination process, right? And they've got a process and they're very good at it. So the final boss of this video game, you go through all the levels, and then I got my interview with Mike Maroney, who's like one of my childhood heroes.
Yeah.
And he's like my Babe Ruth. So I'm like, wow, I can't believe I get to sit across from this guy. And I'm picking his brain and we're having this great interview. And then he takes me into this huge sales rally they're doing in Orlando. And it was like magic, you know? And he said right before we walked in there, and he said, well, here's the thing. Because I was saying, I want to be a Mercedes or Lexus. And he said, that's not happening. Not going to just, we've got people in General Manager University that we've been developing. There's all these people that are in our pipeline, and they get first crack at those stores. He said, now I'll tell you what I do have. I got a Ford store in St. Petersburg. And I said, okay. He goes, and at this point, I'd really only been in luxury stores. And he said, do you think you're too good to work in a Ford store? He goes, it's not the best facility, not in the best location. And I said, well, it sounds like the Mercedes store I worked at. He goes, but this is a big store, big service, big volume. It's just a big operation, huge collision center. And I said, well, yeah, if it pays. And he said, so you don't think, so it was really a test. So they hired me for that Ford store. I ended up going down there the first day, relocated, um, moved down there, and I mean, one day they transferred me to the Lexus store. They just wanted to see if
Really?
yeah, it was like a Willy Wonka, like a everlasting gobstopper.
You're kidding
Because
me.
and the whole, I went down there 3 times to go look through the financials, and or Dave Kaler telling me, he goes, yeah, you were driving me crazy. I knew you were never going to like stay there. But I had to sit there and go through that. He goes, you were just grilling me with all these questions, wasting my time for multiple trips. And because I never got to show you the Lexus store, but they didn't want me just to feel entitled,
Right.
going right
Wow.
into that opportunity. And the other learning experience through this little journey is I went up and I had to resign, face to face with Mel Shanko.
Ugh.
And he had been my mentor up to that point, like really, really close. And he had poured into me, um, everything, leadership, and I mean, just so many mistakes that I made that he guided me through. And I was so raw when he met me. So I got to go up there and tell him that, right? And I'm expecting him to be angry and we're going to get into an argument or something. And he just stared out the window and he asked me, he goes, where did I go wrong? I didn't see this coming. And I'm like, so now I'm like getting all teared up. And um, he goes, how do we make this right? And how do we work this out? And, um, I'm like, I don't, it's done. And I didn't think you even saw any value in me. And he goes, you didn't say a word. You just internalized all this stuff. How would I know? And that was
There
like
it is. Yeah.
a light. I'm like, how would he know? And I'd never once looked at it from his perspective. And I remember Steve Germain, he goes, and I said, I want to go talk to Steve. He goes, Steve doesn't want to talk to you. And it really upset me at the time. And it made me angry. But he also poured into me the same way. And I
Yeah.
learned so much. And I didn't realize it for like 2 or 3 years afterward, because I was too busy being resentful and just looking at it from my perspective, and I didn't realize how much like him I became and how many lessons he taught me that he never explained, that I'm like, that's why he did that. And that's why, and I find myself doing all these things to other people that he did to me. And I didn't, and since then, he and I, bonded and talked about stuff. And I've thanked him as I've gone back in time and done that with so many people
Sure.
about, I didn't appreciate you at the time. And I should have, and I wish I would have even spent more time learning from all of them. And then, Steve's like, I didn't come out there because I was too hurt to,
Wow.
talk to you, because been to Germany together and all over the world together. Um, and just my lack of being direct and telling them what was going on with me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change any of the mistakes. I mean, I banged myself up more, as much as anybody, but maybe more. But I wouldn't change anything for the world. But I do look back and I'm like, that was unnecessary. That was unnecessary. And for anybody who's listening to this podcast, you have an obligation and a duty responsibility to your direct supervisor or the dealer principal to give them first right of refusal. And don't just assume that they know what's going on. They got buy sells going on. They could have law things that they keep from most of the employees that you might not know they have going on, that they're dealing with OEM issues or whatever. Um, they just have so many moving pieces. And when you look at it from a myopic view of just your little world, you lose the big picture as to how much else they're seeing, and they're not able to see every little detail. And unless you tell them,
I see that happen a lot where the people they don't let their direct supervisor, however you want to think about it, they don't let the people at the top know what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish. Like you said earlier, I think sometimes we just assume that they know because you're producing, you're doing a good job, but they may not know you're willing to move 2 hours away to take over a store. They may think for whatever reason they picked up a vibe that you're just into this area and you don't want to leave. But if you don't tell them you're willing to, then they certainly don't know. When you stayed with AutoNation, how long?
Just under 6 years.
Oh, that's a pretty good run, though. I didn't realize you were even with them that long, to be candid with you. And where did you go after that? Back down to
Back to to Naples, Germain Toyota.
yeah. And what was that store? Who had that store before Jermaine had it? Or did Jermaine start that?
Jermaine had it. It's actually a really cool story as to how they. And I asked Bob Germain once. I said, how did you end up in Naples?" And he goes, "It's a crazy story. We were at the Superdome right when it opened back in I think '75 or no '78 is when they were there for a Lincoln meeting,
Mhm.
and they were looking at a Ford Lincoln store over in Del Rey or Palm Beach, one of the two, and buying it back then because they wanted to be in Florida. And they were talking to somebody at the bar at a dealer meeting, and there was another gentleman down at the end of the bar. His name was Bill Barnett, Barnett Bank,
Yeah. Oh
down in
God,
Florida.
you're kidding.
And so he says, yeah, and his son had become the mayor of Naples. So he goes, "Hey, I've got a few. I got a Lincoln dealership then in Florida." And Bob Jr. and Senior, they go, "Where's that at?" He goes, "It's in Naples, Florida." He goes, "Where the hell's that?" He goes, "It's as far south on the west coast as you can go." And he goes, "And what's there?" He goes, "There's just a big dock, great fishing, and that's about it." And so they started talking about it and having a conversation. And he said, "Okay, I might be interested because your son liked to fish. It'd be a great place for him to set up shop." And he goes, "Really, there's nothing there." And he said, "Okay, I'm interested." He goes, "But here's the thing: there's one contingency with this deal. You can't just have the crown jewel." And that Lincoln store ended up becoming the number one Lincoln store in the country until
Okay.
Carlisle. Um,
Oh yeah.
but and Bob Germain himself, became the driver of that. But he goes, "You can't just have the crown jewel. You're going to have to take all the dogs with it. You got to take BMW, Toyota, and Honda." He goes, "Because I'm not just selling you that. You got to take all those off my hand too."
You're kidding.
No, and that Toyota stores turned into Lexus. That's not what they wanted. It was just part of the deal.
Wow. God.
That's 78, 79. And then you know what happened with Toyota in the early 80s and
Yeah.
Honda.
Yeah.
And then it just, yeah.
Wow. Now, how long were you at Germain Toyota in
So I
Naples?
got there in 16 and then I left there in 21. So what's that? Five, almost 6 years again.
I know what a great job you did there. What would you say was the number one thing that you guys did there that really made such a difference in that store? Because you've done some amazing numbers there. Was there something you
But it
put?
didn't start out like that.
Well, I'm sure.
That's everybody remembers how it ended. It was a horrible J curve. And it was almost like a bone that hadn't been set correctly, that needed to be rebroken
Mhm.
to set it correctly. So we went backwards big time. I mean, I ended up getting, I was getting pipped by Southeast Toyota because they don't mess around,
I
and I
know.
was on multiple pips,
Yeah.
and the pressure that they can put on people,
Brutal. I was on it one time in Tallahassee. I know.
and it's the
That
most.
ain't
It's
fun.
like being like direct from the sun. It's like as close as you can get, and it's more
Yeah.
heat than I've ever felt in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And I felt some heat, but it was intense, and there's only one or two things going to happen, right? And it was, I got down to like almost like I don't know, the last month of it. It was either hitting exceeding this number or
Mm.
somebody else is going in. And I couldn't think any other thoughts. And I remember people would say, "Oh man, this is crazy. This market and the sales efficiency, the math, the way they do it and they calculate the market, it's not fair." And I just remember thinking, kind of like at Mercedes and kind of like at that Lexus store and during September 11th and all those lessons that I had learned over the years. Steve Germain, "Hey, if it's not you, it's going to be somebody else or somebody else after that," and all that stuff going through your brain.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't even think those thoughts. I don't have time to think those thoughts. Where's an appointment? Call a customer. It was just full, like being in a battle, that the bullets are flying. We'll figure out, we'll talk about that stuff some other time. But this number's getting hit. And then once I got out of that situation, it's kind of like in Goodfellas, but when at the beginning it was like, oh, hey, everybody when you're on SET's good side, there's no better feeling
Oh, there isn't.
and no better organization. Um, and no more loyalty. Once you've gone through that fire and
Yep.
that crucible,
Yep. Yep.
you've proved it's no different than the military, right? You've proven yourself to them, and now you're one of them. And that was it's a really special experience, and that
They treat
culture,
you
the
so well.
training,
They treat
they're
you.
the best.
Yeah.
But I would say the best accomplishment at that store was really putting together all the lessons that I had learned from all the mistakes and all of the things. When I left Mercedes, it really fell down the store, and I left it in bad shape. And initially, I thought that was like a badge of honor. Um, and then later, it's my biggest embarrassment probably is I didn't set it up for success,
Mm.
and I promised myself that I would never do that again. So uh, I I always said I wasn't leaving that Toyota store until we were breaking records and sales efficient and all of those things. And it took a lot longer than I thought, and it was a lot harder. But I was able to put together a really good team that's still like fully intact. Every single manager is still there, and I've been gone almost 3 years. And
Has
they're
it been that
all,
long?
yeah, 2 years and 8 months.
Wow. This doesn't seem like it. So let's wrap this up. Tell us, the people who are listening, watching this, tell us what you're now doing. Because I kind of sort of know, but I don't really know. And what you're doing now and what the goal or objective is with the path that you're on. Can you kind of enlighten the listeners to what's going on with you now?
Absolutely, and it's exciting. So I left there with when Bob Holland said was gracious enough to include me in his the sale of AccuTrade to Cars.com, and uh, I joined that, and to have be able to spend weekends with my daughter. She's playing volleyball, as you know, and as I did that, we had to obviously get AccuTrade off the ground and do all that sort of stuff. But as of this month, going into 2025, I'm now the EVP of dealer success, or dealer growth and success. So what that basically means is for all the channels, for Dealer Inspire websites, for Cars.com Marketplace, uh, our media products, our credit IQ products, Dealer Rater, is looking at everything basically as the voice of the dealer, and always being a devil's advocate, I guess, with our teams
Mhm.
to make sure that we're building products that are important for dealers, that we're protecting the dealer's data, we're protecting um, our core values, and really trying to model it after JM Family and Southeast Toyota and JM&A, and how they really are all about the dealer, and the dealer's success is their success. And that's the ethos that I'm instilling internally, and then it'll pour out externally. The more successful our dealers are, the more successful we're going to be. And looking at all of our products that way, because right now we've got some opportunities as it relates to reporting and attribution and making dealers' lives easier. So I'm taking kind of the things that used to drive me crazy as a GM operator, and we've got the data and we've got the technology and we've got all this cool stuff at Cars Commerce, but I'm connecting it to simplify it so that they only have to look at like one report, and
Yeah.
they don't have to go pull this and have to log into all these different sites and tools and all that stuff. I mean, my goal is to, as much as technology driven as I've been, like, every dealership I've worked at, I just ran it by whiteboards. And there was KPIs for service on this one, and the production planning, and my speed to market on this one, and the salespeople had to enter all their stuff and the appointments and all that stuff in the morning. And every F&I, we had our daily meeting and doc meeting, put it on the whiteboard, and updated that with a grease pencil every day,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like T-bar on a windshield. So it's
Yeah.
all
Oh,
visual
yeah.
inspection. You can see what's going on. As much as technology enhances, that's still the meat and potatoes
Yes,
of it.
sir.
So I'm trying to do that digitally, I guess, with our products, so that and the reason why I wanted to go so digital and not have any paper is so that our associates would spend more time with the customers and they weren't making copies and having to fill out 25 forms. So I guess to encapsulate it, I want to do that for our dealers or for like all of our, our dealer customers, and simplify the whole platform and be the anti vendor, not sell dealers data to monetize it, and do all these things that are really tempting and they're really easy to do and they generate a lot of revenue. But just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Amen.
So, that's my new mission is to
Well,
is to reinvent that.
I know that you're in a lot of dealerships. So I'm assuming that you've kind of got your ear to the ground and making sure that what you're hearing and is what the team is doing back at cars um, is meshing well. And you're, like you said, you're trying to guide them, I guess, to in the right direction to make the dealers' lives easier and better. And that
So I'll
fair.
tell you what I did this week. I'm interviewing dealers now, and part of this new role, Doug Miller, our president, he said, I want you to evangelize internally and externally our core values and and how are dealers perceiving it, and it's just like with a customer in a car dealership, right? It's not always pretty and it's not always what you want to hear, but there's opportunities, but I also think it's how you respond to it and if you actually do something with it. So I'm filming. I'm asking dealers, and because to your point, they confide in me. They go, you know what, this has always bothered me, or I need your help with this. So I've got this little device that I bought off the internet, and it tracks. I put my phone in it, and I just have a conversation. I record it, and I'm
Yeah.
sharing these internally, not in a bad way. Just
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
here's the good, the bad, and this is what the dealers are saying, and they're being really, yeah, car dealers are. They're just the way it say it the way it is.
That is
But
great.
it's allowing our internal teams to see it and to really scale it. So then, and the cool thing is that there's so many intelligent, smart people at the company that a lot of it's an awareness issue. And if you don't have the deep rapport, or because I'm a former dealer, they'll confide things in me that maybe they wouldn't with them. So
Mm.
they get to see the curtain pulled back. And I'm like, so this is, and they know how to fix it. And they're like, and most of it, just like with me, my examples with Belashenko, a lot of times it's just an awareness issue that they didn't know.
Sure.
So I'm pulling that curtain back, and
Mm.
I think we're going to be a lot more transparent and a lot better as a result.
Well, Brian, I am so excited about what you're doing, and you're such an asset to the industry. I hear you on Clubhouse. I mean, I love when you come in there in the mornings, and you share so much wisdom and information. It's nice to hear and David get after each other. Uh, but it's just, I mean, you're doing so many great things for this business. So I just want you to know much that we and the people I talk to, myself and everyone, appreciates what you're bringing to the table. So thank you so much, and thank you for your time. I know you're in the middle of traveling, and for you to do this we're doing this in the evening, folks, when he could be out to dinner or taking a nap or having a glass of wine or whatever. So Brian, I can't
There's
thank
no place I'd rather be right now. And I just want to add one thing to what you just said, Tommy.
please.
All the mentors and everybody that I've had, you being at the top of that list,
You're very kind.
I feel that I've got an obligation, a duty, responsibility to pay it forward into the industry because of
Yeah.
so many people that poured into me. Um, that everybody who's listening should have that same obligation. If you've got great mentors that have made you better, you've got a responsibility to pay it forward.
Yeah, amen. That is a great statement. And not to jump back on the Clubhouse for just a second, but that's what I see in Clubhouse. It's like a 20 group on steroids. So many top quality people who really got their act together, really know what's going on, just keep wanting to pour information into everybody. So I appreciate that you're saying that. And God, you're the best, man. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Cool. Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you. Hey, wasn't that really cool getting to know a little bit about Brian Kramer? Look, maybe you know someone, or maybe even it's you that would be interested in doing a podcast with me and telling us your story. My series called What's Your Story is just about that. What is your story? You may not think that your story is all that interesting, but trust me, it is. I really appreciate you taking time to watch us. Thank you and have a great day.